Okay, Peter here from the festival team. It's day 3, Romford Horror Festival. Here to talk to the filmmaker behind the Busby and Me,
Hello.
Wade.
Hello.
Introduce yourself, Wade, and just tell everyone your roles within this film that we've just seen.
So I've been a filmmaker for about 12 or 13 years. That's an independent film, not including the paranormal stuff that was meant to remain a secret until the last year. But yeah, I've been making no-budget independent films for the last 13 years, distributing globally, and this return to my childhood sort of came out of the blue a bit, really.
When was the first time you knew you needed to make this film? Like, what was it you were like, okay, I'm going to make this into a film now?
So, to my knowledge, all of these 8 tapes were missing. Okay. We had hundreds and hundreds of hours of 8 tapes at paranormal locations all over the country, and on VHS from about 2003 to about 2011. I moved to North Yorkshire about a year ago, and I had a friend visit. And I said, oh God, I think we're only 40 minutes away from the Busby Stoop. I filmed there when I was like 17.
Right.
And anyway, drove by, and if I'm being honest, I was horrified with what I saw. Right. I heard they do very nice food there at the restaurant now, but you know, the characteristics of the building were gone, and I saw a legacy that was dying in time. So I wrote a book, The Busby and Me.
Okay.
And I managed to find a degraded DVD-R with my original Windows Movie Maker edit of the original film. So there was nothing I could do with that. It was so hideously degraded. So I just used that to narrate the book and to take screenshots from that for the book. About 3 months after the book's release, I was at my parents' house just outside of Milton Keynes, and I went up in the loft to get some family tapes that I was going to convert for the family. Right. And at the very bottom of that box was all the untouched original masters of the Busby Stoop investigation. And it was astounding that so much didn't exist from the paranormal days, but I'd obviously had some foresight at the time not to tape over those tapes. And so, yeah, we did the best we could and restored the footage, and then went back to Firsk to tell the larger story.
Right, so go full circle.
It really did feel like we went full circle, absolutely.
Okay. How long did it take you to do the editing process, you know, finding those tapes, putting them together and making what we've seen now?
So I was playing around trying to bring the quality up the best I could. The documentary cinematography and main edit was done by Jason Impey, who I'm sure people at Romford Horror will know of.
Yeah, he's been here every day, I think. So far.
Yeah, and so I rang Jason, who we made many films together in the past, and I said, I'm working on this film, would you do the cinematography for the new material and do the edit with me as well? So Jason came, we've made about 20 films together, so we're very familiar with that process. So yeah, he came up, and I brought with me a hard drive with the footage as best as I could have restored it to that point. Right. It was very difficult. The footage, as bad as as much as a Sony Handycam, really wasn't too bad. But then obviously when you put it next to the brand new 4K footage, I suppose to some people that's quite astounding. I mean, I find it charming. But
have you always been a big fan of the kind of shows that this kind of, you know, paranormal ghost hunting kind of shows? Is that something you've always enjoyed? Or?
I mean, in context, the people involved in making this film had said to me, you do realise when you started filming the paranormal was the first year that Ghost Adventures was being filmed in America, and obviously that became an industry all of its own.
Right. So what year would that have been, sorry? Just recap, did you say that?
I started filming the paranormal in 2003. So it was around that time. But what I'd originally set out to do wasn't using a medium or something like the Busby. I used to record everywhere, and I tried to launch a free paranormal network on MySpace. And that was the idea behind it, that people could share their paranormal footage as a network on MySpace. I didn't really succeed, I tried. But you know, the paranormal then wasn't on brand like it is now. I mean, I was the weird kid, and the other people doing it was the weird kid, and you know, every time you walked into a pub, it was, we got loads of spirits here, as they pointed to the vodka bottles, but it was a joke. You know, but you know, one thing that really occurred to me when I did watch the footage back is I was quite amazed that how much passion I had then and how I was so into it, and it kind of reminded me to carry on being passionate about things, because I felt my passion was dwindling a bit for filmmaking. But it was a different landscape then. And what I like about what we've done with the film is I was faced with two choices. It was jazz it up as much as I could to suit current audiences, or roll the dice and risk including the cumbersome material, because that's how the paranormal was. We weren't using Alice boxes then to so-called, you know, communicate through radio waves with spirits. There wasn't, I've never been to a location, I've been to some really famous locations, I've never met a demon, you know, I don't believe in this stuff. For me to believe in the demons, I'd have to be religious in some way. The paranormal is an industry now. And in the lead up to making this documentary, I thought I will dip back into paranormal TV and have a look. And I was horrified for all the wrong reasons. Because people have to remember, when all is said and done, these channels need to make money now. But I was quite surprised at how outlandish it could be. And I felt that it held its audiences in contempt. And so that's not to talk about anyone else's efforts. That you know, I wouldn't sit here and go this show or that show, but I personally felt it held its audience in contempt, made us feel foolish, and so the choice was made to try and present how the paranormal used to be, that you moved from room to room, that something didn't always happen, that I spent so many quiet nights, and that's why I made the decisions that I did, for better or worse.
Where else have you played the film? How's it been received? Have you received any useful feedback?
Yeah, I mean, it played, naturally, its opening night was at the Ritz Cinema in First, and we had a sellout audience in there. It was a really beautiful evening. Really well received after, and loads of people coming up. And what I really liked is there was a lot of people there that had either investigated the Busby back in the day, or just were really intrigued by the story. And I suppose the best compliment I could have got is the people that came up and said, that's how the paranormal used to be. That's how it is done right. I mean, my 17-year-old would have been so happy with that. But, you know, and then of course there are, you know, I always tell the truth, there are people that I'm sure find this documentary completely cumbersome. Walking from room to room and talking and saying what's being said. I suppose your enjoyment level would be based on A, how you find Lynn as a medium, and B, how you found me, and whether you believe us or not. So I knew the risk when I went into this, that I was not making what people experience on TV with the paranormal now. But I wouldn't change that, because the feedback so far is those that do watch the paranormal or go on ghost hunts have really enjoyed it.
Right. And you made the film that you wanted to make, not the one that you thought other people would match what the current trends are that you described there.
I felt all the way through as like I just wanted to honour the 17-year-old that didn't have the resources that I do now. The experience or the resources. I mean, when I started my independent film career, I ripped down all the paranormal stuff offline and never spoke about it again for fear of embarrassment. And actually, it's been really lovely going, this is what I did, and I'm really proud of it now. So it's been a real personal journey, because the Busby got more personal than anything else. I give one story on the television, you know, on the documentary, but so many weird things happened following this documentary, and since we started filming again, a lot of strange things again. That picture, all this material was refound. I didn't have it anymore. We've had to search everywhere. And now the sketch of Thomas Busby is framed in my living room. So yeah, it just feels really lovely to have honoured what I wanted to do back then, but with more of the ability to do it. Yeah, and I didn't, I say at the beginning of the documentary, it's not scream heavy, it's not bump in the night, but I am happy with what we've done.
Good. Was there any audience questions? Pop your hand up. Yeah, one here, and then come to you next there.
Okay. When you use the word cumbersome, I can see what you mean, that you've not got a strong narrative in the original thing.
Yeah.
But let's say there was a point where Lynn was picking up of the timid hotel worker and the bullying manager, and when you heard the voice and you recorded it, I heard back to work.
Did you?
And when you followed your narrative, it said I, but I distinctly heard back to work, and I thought, wow, that's why I was wondering, is it genuine? And wow.
No, it's what's presented on the screen is genuine, and and I said at another Q&A I did, someone was obviously more sceptical, and I said I will never argue with anyone for their scepticism; they're entitled to it. I would worry that someone wouldn't question everything. I think we've got to, because especially with false news these days and the internet that just posts any old story with a clickbait article, we have to keep questioning everything, and that's what makes the paranormal. I mean, I feel totally energized by this film again. To question all that, and it is interesting. You just made me think. After the screening in First, I hadn't ever thought about it because so much has come up. There's a point where Lynn says near the beginning of the film that she felt he had some infirmities, and she used the word infirmities and said that it's not a word in her vocabulary. Now, what was really interesting is a gentleman came up to me after the first night in First, and he said, I used to drink at the Busby Stoop decades ago, and he really liked the film. We were chatting, and he went, however, he said, you remember the medium, and it said infirmities, and I went, yeah, and we'd never said anything about it, we just took it as it was. And his feeling, or what used to be discussed in the pub when it operated as a pub in the 60s, 70s, 80s, is that it's not called the Busby Stoop because of the stoop of the execution, because of his infirmity.
Wow.
And we'd never picked that up, we'd never thought about that. And when this guy said it, I went, wow. And that's why it's important to take these films back home to the people it affects, And to me, as soon as he said it, I felt that was right. It just felt right. So, and that was, I just wanted to share that because it's a great story.
It made me shiver.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And
brilliant.
I know I keep thinking of it, just the other thing to say, a really bad degraded piece of footage at the end where we go 169 miles away from the Busby Stoop. I know it's really, that didn't come off a master tape, it's really degraded. But I still had my doubts about Lynn because I'd never used a clairvoyant, I wanted to challenge her. And I felt this connection with Thomas, and I was going, am I just caught up in the moment? I sat there in Seance Circle that night, 169 miles away, and I kept a poker face, and I was calling to Thomas in my head, going, Thomas Busby, if you're there, show yourself. Thomas Busby, if you're there, show yourself. And that is when she turns to me and says, why have I just got the name Thomas? And that's when I open my eyes, I turn to her, and I nod that I just called him in. And that was when I'd made my mind up.
Yeah, that's brilliant.
Another question here? Yep.
Would you sit in the chair yourself?
Would you sit in the chair yourself?
Everyone always asks me that. And they're more surprised by the answer, no, I wouldn't. No, Lynn would have, I wouldn't. I believe what Lynn says. I believe the chair isn't the original, because at the time that the chair was made, it would have been made with a pole lathe. That chair you see on the screen is machine spindled. That didn't happen in 1702. However, the reason I say I wouldn't sit in the chair is because I believe in self-fulfilling prophecies, and I believe in a certain amount of luck. And there's been times in First where that chair has whipped the locals into a frenzy. That is why it was removed from the pub by the landlord. And when you create such negativity around something, I don't want anything to do with it. So no, I wouldn't sit in the chair.
Could I have one more?
Yeah, go for it.
They did say, Lynn said first chair, and then later you discovered it wasn't. She said it's not the original chair.
Exactly.
So the first chair.
Yeah. So he was trying to tell us the night before that it wasn't the first chair, but obviously we couldn't decipher that at the time. But you're exactly right. That's what we think. So.
Any more out there?
Wait.
Oh yeah, go on. Yep.
We've worked together before. I didn't know anything of your previous background, and I've got a couple of questions. One, how long did Thomas stay with you after that filming? Obviously, he came back a few weeks later, you thought, and do you believe that he could still be with you? And I suppose two, would you go back to it?
Would I?
Would you go back to the
I'll do the first one first. The second one's complicated. So, I would say after the Busby stoop, I had incidents for about 2 years. Okay, when I left Kettering and I stopped doing the paranormal, my attention was zoned out of those sorts of things. So, yes, it did stop eventually because I wasn't tuned in at all. I wasn't paying any attention to it. I would say, but the minute last year that I went back on this journey, it's all started again. I can have things happen around my house. The lady that sat in the chair here with the pink hair, I tried my own automatic writing with Thomas because I got back in touch with the clairvoyant and she told me to do so. And this is the first time I've ever said this, and I won't go too much into it, but I'd only just met Mickey at the time, and after welcoming Thomas in the next evening, I managed to describe her nana to her, what her nana's house looked like, her husband's mother's house, and this was just the days preceding this. There was no reason for it, but I managed to describe all of that. I don't know what that's about, but it's what happened. And we've had knocking since. We've had just strange occurrences. The second one, maybe, but not in the same way. I don't want to travel around being a ghost guy or filming everything. If I could come up with something again where I could bring paranormal expertise to it as well as history, then I'd do it. But I don't just want to fumble about in the dark for no reason. But the medium did tell me when we got back in touch that I will be making a return to the paranormal, and apparently that will be when a family needs me. So, I don't know. Who knows? Maybe next year's festival. So.
Well, thank you so much for joining us, bringing your film here. Give a round of applause, please, for Wade.
Thank you very much. Thank you.